Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co-host, Ed Carbajal, and on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, how you doing, my man?
Horrible. Fucking horrible.
Yeah,
The
we'll get.
sad day in MMA right now.
It's not that bad, but I can imagine being a New York fan and getting some of the news that we're gonna get into here shortly. Um, so this week we're just gonna kind of be shooting everything in the world of MMA right now. Uh, the events of last weekend, the upcoming event, big UFC mega fight, and we're joined by my buddy Yuri Thompson, member of the MMA Community.com forum. Spark Yuri on there. One of my good MMA buddies and somebody who travels around the country with me when I go to my fights. So great to have you on, Yuri. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Well, thanks for having me.
So we'll jump right into it. One of the reasons we brought you on is you were there live front and center for the big Bellator 206 event this past weekend, the Musashi versus McDonald card. Why don't you tell us about that experience? Obviously, the fans can see your wall in the back. You're a big Bellator and Scott Coker fan. How was it?
I thought it was great. I've been to quite a few Bellators, and we have. It's something else. You go back to the kind of when the transition was happening from the UFC back in the day where, we started getting from the 30s, 40s, 50s and on, and it just blew up and exploded. And that's the feeling you get here where people are still accessible and you're able to enjoy a pretty awesome experience. The arena itself, just on fire. And it reminded me of Bellator. Was it Chicago? I was there in 198. Just electric, and the production and the showmanship and just the general atmosphere and feel was fantastic.
What was when Rampage and Wanderlei when that outcome happened? How did the crowd react in the arena? Because I'm one of the few people that I didn't sign up for the zone to watch it, but the highlights I saw, it looked like it almost felt like watching like a pride event or something, the way the production value and everything looked.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is when you're scattered around the MMA community all over the place, the blogs, the different forums and everything, you always get that kind of negative crowd that's like, oh boy, these are just two guys past their prime. They need to retire. They've had enough. Hang them up. And I've always been that guy that says, let these guys fight. If they want to fight, let them fight. They've still got it in them. And during that moment, when they came out, and you've got Vanderlei's stuff going, oh, man, that's all you needed. Yeah. And from there on out, it was, man, that crowd just got pumped. And then Rampage came out with the chains going and all of that. That whole spirit just lifted. And then during that fight, it was just like the old days. So hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully, I wouldn't mind seeing a fifth. And I'm not lying. I would watch that. But, man, when those fists were flying, that whole crowd was up. And it was just like the old days.
Well, Silva said he wanted to do it again, actually, after in the post-fight press conference. So that's interesting that a fan like yourself would want to see a fifth. I mean, in all honesty, like I am one of those guys. I mean, I think all three of us are one of those guys that every time we hear about legends, quote unquote legends, because they call them legends, they seem to call all the older guys legends when they're going to fight. It's like people do want to kind of like knock it down a bit, but they still tune in because it's still, what they bring to the table. And it's definitely something that I wouldn't mind seeing again either. I mean, I'm actually, as much as people are talking junk about like Liddell Ortiz, I don't mind that fight. I'll watch them throw down again. If they're both healthy enough and they're cleared by doctors to do it, why the hell not?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. All those guys that are saying, Liddell Ortiz, no, please hang them up, but they're going to watch and we're all going to watch and we're curious to know, and if they want to fight, let them fight, and I know you remember back in, Shockwave, you watched Helio walking up 2002 and light that torch. And that was with Inoki. And that was just an incredible moment. And afterwards, he was interviewed, and he said, "You still want to fight?" This guy's 90 years old or something. He says, "Hey, you bring in my size, and I'll do it." The guy's 90 years old. Say, "Hey, would I not watch? Of course I'm going to watch that." So, but yeah, super curious. And as far as Bellator goes, and Rampage and Vanderlei, incredible atmosphere, man. It was like being there for obviously the Japanese crowds back in, Pride around probably, what was it? It was after 25. I think it was 25 when Rampage KO'd Randleman, and then, Vanderlei jumps in there and they do their thing and made it anticipated. But the crowd feel the anticipation once they were in the ring, it was right there. So it was great.
Was and for the fans that didn't see it, Rampage ended up winning by late second round knockout in a back and forth slugfest. Yeah, I mean, this was one that paid off. We've had a few legends fights or some of the old timers fights didn't exactly live up to the hype, but this one, both guys came into the cage, didn't show any fear, and really kind of, although it was a little bit slower version of what we had seen, obviously in their prime, they both pretty much used the same game plan that made them successful their whole careers. So it made it fun to watch. Was the arena a sellout by your estimation?
I think we were into the prelims about the second fight in. I looked up and I noticed, man, this thing's 75% full, and we haven't even got close to the main card yet. And I would say technically that would be a sellout. I think you always look up in the cheap seats and the nosebleeds, and you see that, okay, there's a few up there but it sure felt like a sellout. So if it wasn't, it was darn close, and I'm sure under the technical category it did. One thing on that Rampage Vanderlei fight, what I thought was real cool, kind of had an old Kimbo versus Tank moment where Wandy was kind of, running around, and Rampage steps back and he says, "Right here, let's do it." And everybody just felt that. Or like when you remember Kimbo dropped his mouthpiece, he picks it up, hucks it into the crowd goes wild. That's kind of what it felt like. But yeah, I would say it's pretty close technically to a sellout.
Awesome. And then obviously somebody we've watched fight a few times live together at events, and this is the first fight of his career I've actually missed. The Phenom Aaron Pico. Holy shit, man. I we talked about him maybe going a few rounds and getting some cage time with our show last week or the week before, but my God, his destruction of Higo was pretty rough. First round knockout. Did you get a chance to catch that one, Ed? We lost Yuri there. I'm sure he'll be jumping back in. Did you get a chance to catch the Pico fight?
I saw the highlights of it, but I mean, when we spoke last week, I had him winning, and I mean that kid's definitely. It's time for him to. We're talking about Aaron Pico, Yuri. Now that you're back,
yeah,
the Aaron Pico win. I mean, that kid's definitely. I think that kid's ready to start facing some. I mean, Higo was kind of like the gateway to like higher competition, but he's definitely that kid's. It's time for. He pointed at Pitbull, actually, right? One of the Pitbull brothers. He said, "You're next," or yelled at him or something like that.
Yeah, he did. He's yeah. Sorry, I lost you there for a minute. I'm technically challenged, but yeah, he pointed to Patricio, and basically what he was telling him was, "It's your time is soon. Your time is soon."
Yeah.
And he's being respectful, and he's caught up in the heat of the moment. But that's what he kind of said at the press conference. There was like, "Hey, you're much respect. You're Pitbull. You've done what you've done, but it's time, and it's my time." And that's kind of, I think, how he felt. That moment was fantastic. Unfortunately, I wasn't sitting in the chair I was supposed to be at that moment, as sometimes we get up and go grab a beer, which is what I did. But I came in just in time for Pico, and I ran in. Everybody else kind of floating around. I said, "You guys are going to miss Aaron Pico. This guy's lightning." Just like Coker said right afterward, this guy's lightning. And I think he put that out on Instagram or Twitter or something, but that's what it's like, lightning in a bottle, and you uncork it, and this guy goes. And man, you could just feel every punch. Man, what a moment. That kid, it's something special. And I know Matt, he's seen 4 of the 5 now, so we're tied. We're tied at something. But yeah, that was just amazing. And what a test Higo we thought would be. It just turns out, I think when Aaron turns it up, it's kind of tough to tell who that challenge is going to be. I think that first one was a lightweight fight. and you can understand, the jitters or whatever. But and actually, Matt and I had a kind of a bet going. What do you think's going to happen in his second fight? I said, well, I think he's going to be tentative. He's going to kind of feel the ring out, and he might let it go 3 rounds. We might see his wrestling, and he might. But no, he came out like a firecracker, and that's what he's done ever since.
I already forgot that he wrestles. He's been knocking out so many dudes. You know what I mean? Like I feel like his opponents too are gonna forget his wrestling pedigree. He keeps on going the way he's going, because that's the other thing too. He's got world-class wrestling. I mean, even if something happens that somebody can actually, slip enough of those strikes and avoid that power in exchange with him, he still has wrestling to fall back on, which is what everyone was expecting. I think Matt and I talked about it a couple episodes ago. How because he was a world-class wrestler, people were expecting that, and that's why he lost that first fight. But then he came out of nowhere and showed off his striking, his boxing, which people weren't expecting, and it looks like he's been putting everybody away, especially with the body shots, which is crazy for a young man like him.
Yeah, he even went for a killer body shot. Tried to finish it when he had Higo up against the fence, kind of reeling. He went for the body shot, and it landed. It didn't drop him. He eventually landed about a 3-punch combination that put him down.
Well, if you watch that fight, what's interesting is that it looked like Higo was expecting a body shot because he carried his hand. If you watch the finish, Higo was carrying his hands low, almost like he was trying to protect his body, and which is why Pico obviously went to the head. But I mean that's what you're supposed to do in striking. But it was just crazy how it's almost crazy how like when someone's good at something, when you know what they're going to do and they still do it anyway. You know what I mean?
It's almost like a throwback. I mean, I've said it about Pico before about how he just seems like he's one of those special talents, but it's almost as if all of his opponents, they hear they're going up against a wrestler. It kind of reminds me of the Victor Gracie, the old Vitor Belfort days, where everybody kept hearing from Tank Abbott to Ferrazzo, and then he eventually, when he really was quote unquote Victor Gracie, he fought a guy named John Hess, who was kind of a loudmouth against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in one of the early Super Brawl events, and basically almost put Hess into a coma with a knockout for the ages. But everybody just expected a jiu-jitsu guy. He came in with the Gracies, and all of a sudden he comes in, he's got this hand speed and this boxing ability, and it reminds me a lot about Pico. Vitor never really showed the ground game that we kind of been promised.
Rafael Lovato's debut fight comes to mind too. Everybody talked about his jiu-jitsu, and he went and knocked the guy out with a crow cop head kick.
Same kind of thing, but and Lovato is outstanding as well. But for somebody to be so young, I mean, we saw Vitor join the sport when he was 18, 19 years old. Pico's 20, 21. I mean, he's somewhere right in that range, and
it's so much time to get better, and he's already so good. Like he's gonna change his physical form. I think at this point, the way he's evolving, kind of like Dragon Ball Z, like he's gonna. Like the Cell Saga, he's gonna become some sleek, bulletproof looking purple and blue dude.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people kind of joking about it on Twitter, and I started thinking about it. But I've seen people talk, how they want to see Pico fight Conor McGregor, and initially, right when you hear that, you kind of think, oh, that's too much for Pico. It's and then you start thinking about it, and from what you've seen from him, from what you've seen from Pico, it would be hard as hell to pick against him.
Yeah,
I mean, the speed and power he's shown. Maybe it's because we haven't seen McGregor in the octagon in 2 years now.
Yeah.
So
we also still have to see how Pico handles taking like a heavy from another solid striker. I mean, we're really riding the high off of that win, but we still have to see him. Like we got to see him fight somebody that's not like a well-known striker. Somebody that's a legitimate knockout threat against him. Just to see, I mean, we got to see how he takes a punch. Is what I'm trying to say. We obviously know his wrestling pedigree is good enough to help him, avoid takedowns, avoid submissions. Just his mat awareness and body awareness will help him with there. It's against elite level strikers that we got to see him against. So I mean, he still has a couple of fights before a title shot is due, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it might get to the point where they just got to give it to him. The amount of hype behind him and the way he's finishing opponents, it might be hard for Coker to keep him away from a title shot. And you don't want to risk him losing to somebody that, you know, if he loses to Pitbull, it's no real harm. He comes back, he fights back. If he loses to somebody that's a little bit more borderline mediocre, it would definitely kill the hype train and the potential money stream there.
And it doesn't matter to him either, because obviously he lost to they hyped him for the fight with Freeman in his first fight, and he brushed that off like nothing, better than guys older than him do, you know. So I don't think it's going to matter to him. He's so young, he's got so much time left to do, and he's talking about trying out for the Olympics again. So we'll see what he does.
And you know, one thing about Pico too is that, and you know, when Coker was asked about this in the post fight, you know, he thought about it and he says, you know, I don't think so. You know, you look at that record and it says 3-1 or it says 4-1 or whatever it is. But we know that, you know, when this kid was 12 years old, he's boxing the hell out of stuff. And people come in there and go, wow, this is the next guy. Then he goes on and does his Golden Gloves, but really his passion since 4 years old has always been wrestling. So to Coker's point, he says this guy's already had 200, 300, 400 fights. Who knows? You know, the competition is there. And it's the same way when you're in Thailand or something like that. These guys got 300 fights. All of a sudden they come in and this guy's only 5-1. Next thing you know, he's mopping up the crew. So Pico, I think, falls under that category. You know, it's a tough one again. Then we're getting into the AJ McKee Pico territory where what do we do? Dad's coach of both, you know, and both of them are amazing. One's got a record with a loss. The other guy's undefeated. McKee's sitting at what, 12-0? And then you got one who's a little bit bigger, you know, sitting at 5'10", and then maybe Pico's sitting at 5'7", and maybe one drops, maybe one goes up and stays. It's a tough one, but I think both those guys could get a title shot. And I actually asked AJ about that, and he says, you know, I got to put food on the table, man. I got to put food on the table, you know, and that's what you'll hear a lot of the time. Yeah, that's what it comes down to, you know.
Yeah, Pico seemed more, you know, kind of like the respect to the camp and his dad. He kind of didn't answer or entertain it at the post-fight press conference. He was just kind of like, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But, you know, his dad's my coach. I train with him. It's not something I even want to, like, think about right now.
It's very respectful.
I don't think it's one we need to rush. The Bellator's open to catchweight fights, moving guys up and or down. I don't think they need to fight each other anytime soon right now. Maybe, I mean, I'm talking 5 years down the line. Maybe let's see them fight. But, you know, if they're both 30-1 or something like that at that point. But right now there's plenty of competition. I don't think Bellator should risk damaging one of their stars for that. The event was loaded. We're obviously going to get into the tournament, which kicked off for the welterweight. I got to admit, I was wrong on my pick. I know Yuri was wrong on his pick. I can't remember who Ed picked exactly, but
it was Koreshkov. Who was it? It was Lima and
Koreshkov.
I think I was wrong too because I picked Koreshkov.
Yeah, Lima choked him out in the fifth round, late in the fifth round by rear naked choke.
Yeah.
In a fight he pretty much dominated. I mean, it wasn't the violent war that maybe some of us saw coming up, but he pretty much controlled the pace, and Koreshkov really didn't bring what I know most of us anticipated that he'd bring to the cage.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're disappointed with that one, Yuri. How did you see that from the crowd?
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting. When that first was going down, it was Koreshkov came in like steel. I mean, you looked in his eyes and said, this guy is looking at nobody else. So when he was up there on stage, you've got whoever's up there. You've got the card up there. And Koreshkov looked at nobody else, just straight over to Lima, hands clenched the entire time. Every introduction just out there. And I said, wow, this is scary. But then the fight happened. And he comes out with that spinning kick, and next thing you know, he goes in for wrestling and wants to pin him and do that with Lima. Lima's a strong guy. I don't know that was the best thing to do. I think that Koreshkov is skilled enough to stay on the feet and do what he's got to do there and at least entertain the crowd. But you know that there's that $1 million on the line. So he's over and over and over in his head. He doesn't want to make the mistake. He sits there and says, this is what my camp came up with. I think this is what I've got to do. I think there was a mistake made there, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, Lima's one of those guys that people keep overlooking. I mean, myself included, guilty of doing it. I mean, we just forget the fact that the guy, you know, that the guy was held a title and defended it, and he's definitely. I mean, he beat Lawrence Larkin. He beat forget who else did he beat.
Lima beat Larkin, beat Korshkov.
Yeah, so
beating
it's just
everybody basically.
So it's just like sometimes when his name comes up in the main card bout, people tend to look over it because of who the other guy is. I don't know why. Maybe it's because he doesn't market himself well, but I think that's the only reason why. Because obviously, what he does in the fight is what matters and what counts.
I think so.
Yeah,
Lima is. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, to Ed's point there. I know I stated it. I thought that these were probably the 1 and the 2 guys in the tournament. So in spite of Lima losing, I still thought at worst he was the number 2 guy in this tournament. And when we get to the main event, I still don't necessarily, or I still can stand by that statement to a point. Obviously Rory is a different animal at 170 than what we saw at 185, but I still think that Lima and Korshkov are both the future of the 170 division, and I think that they beat everybody else in the tournament, possibly with the exception of the champ himself, Rory McDonald.
And I think you hit it on the head there, because really, if you post fight, Lima said that's a tough guy. I could not make a mistake against him. If I did, I get knocked out. And Lima is an incredible fighter. So those 3 right there, Rory and Andre, it could be a round robin for the next 3 years. While you got guys like Fitch or whoever wrestling, Ed Ruth, Neiman Gracie, and other guys like that, or you've got Semtex and MVP duking it out on the feet. But when you're talking about well-rounded, it's Rory, it's Lima, and it's Korshkov in that division, and it's an incredible one.
Yeah,
sorry,
but then I could be wrong, and the MVP could go out and knock everybody out somehow. But you never know.
Yeah, no, you never. In tournaments, you really do never know. The I mean, this has nothing to do with the fight. Before we move on to the other one, I just wanted to ask really quick: when at the arena and stuff, were they? I saw the logo and stuff on the cage or whatever, but as far as like when you walk in, were they doing anything to push the zone on folks, like giving out promo codes, anything like that? Was anything being handed out?
I didn't see any of that. I saw kind of the DAZN emblem everywhere. It was around the cages. It was everywhere. So it was Bellator and DAZN, Bellator, DAZN, and that was the padding, and that was everything. I didn't see a whole lot of flyers and excess promotion other than that.
I feel like they should do something like that.
I feel like before that slips my mind, and we go on to the main event, I need to ask one of the most important questions. We know Gaston Bolaños opened the main card with a KO win, and he's another good prospect. I know he's friends with Gina Carano. Was she in the arena?
I did not see her. I'm sure if she saw me, she would have grabbed me and pulled me over to sit with her. But no, I didn't see her this time.
If you didn't see her, then she wasn't there, because she's not somebody you don't see.
That's right.
There you go. Well, I got that out of the way. I had to make sure I cleared that up for the MMA world. But that brings us to the main event, which was the super fight between 170-pound champion Rory McDonald and the current 185-pound middleweight champion Gegard Mousasi. All you can really say is that I don't think anybody can question Mousasi's place in the grand scheme of the world of MMA. I mean, he is quickly elevating himself into the top echelon that we've ever seen in the sport.
Yeah, I agree, and I've felt that way about Mousasi for a long time. He obviously, him and Fedor were on the same team for a while there, and they toured, and that broke up. Mousasi went his way, went to Strikeforce. Questionable fights, to say the least, with King Mo and I believe it was Jardine. Mm-hmm. When you're bringing talent into another organization, a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, this is Jardine. Right now, he's the name. So if he kind of does what he does, let's give the fight to him. And I felt that about that. But Mousasi is sitting in that place where he might be the most underrated GOAT candidate there has ever been. And I say that because he's been clean, and he puts it in his contract that he wants other fighters to be clean. And I don't have anything to say one way or another about steroids. It's the foundation of the industry. but he does not do it, or at least that's the impression we get. Fedor never did. And so when you think about the guys who he's fought and lost to, maybe got busted, Machida being one of those, you think that this guy, you just look at his resume, it's unreal. If he's taken out Mark Hunt, if he's taken out up and down, and it doesn't matter to him. You look at it, and the guy is not, people don't want to fight Masasi unless there's a paycheck, a big one involved, and that's it. They look at the champ, and I think that's how Rory is. He'll fight anyone, anytime. Great challenge for him. But I think Masasi is kind of definitely spreading the field and letting the MMA world know where he might be all time. And a lot of people haven't seen that. And some of us have.
I know this was the first time I believe you got to see him fight live. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that was I was really happy for that. It was something else. And yeah, if you watch that replay, you'll see a hand come out and reach out onto the ramp. Just one. Oh, yeah, wow. I got it. So I got my two moments. I got one from Fedor once and one from Masasi. That was pretty neat. So I still need to go back and watch that on replay. But
it's funny you mentioned that nobody wants to fight Musashi except for a paycheck. During the pre-show or the intro to the event, that's all that John McCarthy and Josh Thompson, and for some reason it slips my mind who was the other guy in the booth, but all they were talking about was it was Chael Sonnen. They were just all mentioning how you don't ask for Musashi. You only fight Musashi when Coker calls you up and goes, "This is the fight you have." Nobody, and that's kind of always been the case. Even in the UFC, nobody was running him. You bring up the steroid thing. Machida, I guess, was cleared, but obviously there's still kind of an issue there. I believe King Mo tested positive at one point. I know he was suspended. I believe it was for a steroid. That's 2 of his 6 losses out of 56 fights, 57 fights. His list of, he's got some legends on there. Gary Goodridge, you mentioned Mark Hunt, Dan Henderson, Vitor Belfort, some guys older, but, he also took out a younger OSP. It's hard to imagine where he's at, where he's going to end up. He was on I think a 5-fight winning streak when the UFC let him go. And I think, I think back and I can't really think of a bigger blunder in the history of UFC as far as letting a fighter go. We thought it might have been Rory McDonald with the way that, after Woodley kind of won the belt and was kind of wrecking the welterweight division. You remember what Rory did to him when they fought, but Musashi just seems like he's had 50, like I said, 56, 57 career fights, but he seems like he's just in his prime right now. And I don't see anybody in Bellator beating him. And I don't know if I see anybody in UFC. I think he'd have his way with Robert Whittaker personally. I don't see anybody in the world right now that beats him at 185 pounds.
Yeah, no, there's no way. Overall, because I think, styles make fights, and sometimes there's that guy. But when you're looking at just kind of the scope of everything and you take everybody's skills, who beats the most people? Masasi is that guy. And that's just the way I see it there. I agree with you totally.
His weakness was always kind of his defensive wrestling. He would get a little bit lazy and he'd get taken down occasionally and kind of, he would be striking from his back, but he would kind of take the disadvantaged position, and it cost him in a couple of those fights. But it seems like he's improved his wrestling, and he was always good at jiu-jitsu, but he seems like his offensive jiu-jitsu game now and everything is just so much better. And we never really got to the final, but he finished Rory in the second round with just vicious ground and pound after controlling him for the whole, first round was a little bit of back and forth. Rory landed a couple decent shots, but once the second round came and Musashi got him down to the ground and he just pulverized him, got mountain, just through vicious ground and pound. And that's Musashi's done that, from his fights with Babalu to Sokaju. That's, I saw those fights at the SAP Center there, and it was the same kind of thing. Once he got the guy down on the ground, it was just lights out, and there was no, it's amazing where he's at, and I can't get over that the UFC let him go, and it's good for Bellator and it's good for their brand. And one could potentially argue that the UFC or Bellator has the best 170 and 185 pound fighter in the world right now, which is which is quite
Yeah.
a quite a statement to make, considering where we were at just 4 years ago or so.
And not only that, we can't forget that didn't Minikoff just sign a contract with Bellator?
He's back. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
he is
he's
back.
the uncrowned, obviously, or he was the crowned. He walked away, but he's an undefeated heavyweight champion, and the UFC heavyweight division's a little bit of flux right now. Obviously Cormier's the man, but he's up there in age, and at best he's probably got one, maybe two more fights at heavyweight. One against Lesnar, which isn't really a in anybody's top heavyweight count, and the other one most likely would be John Jones going up, who's never had a heavyweight fight. So yeah, I mean, one could argue the heavyweight, and you throw Pico in that mix, and you got guys like Chandler, and I mean and Pitbull. Bellator's loaded right now. The depth, they need to keep adding that depth, but right now their top is, if you had all the champs of Bellator against all the champs of UFC, 3 years ago you would have been like 10-1 UFC. Now I think you'd be closer to 500, honestly.
And maybe better. Really, you'll never know. We don't know, but we know that guys like Ben Henderson came over, and boy, he got everybody thinks because you walked into that octagon, all of a sudden there's a magic crown that comes over you, and you are the part of the greatest in the world. But we know that that goes both ways. We think about pride, obviously, but you never know. And Benson Henderson came in there and got scrubbed quick. Still an awesome fighter, still incredible, but he was one of those first to lead the charge out of the UFC and come over to Bellator. And and we've seen what happened. I mean, now it's almost you forget that he's part of the division almost, just because there's so much of a firecrackers in every division. And no, I agree. I think we're sitting at that point where it's a solid fact that they are at least 500 head to head. Minikoff has been lineal number one consensus for at least a couple of years. I know a lot of people will look at the Czech Congo fight and go, hey, is this guy really that good? But he was, and sometimes fighters fight up to who they're fighting to. And Masasi's been one of those guys in the past, but we know how good he is. And it's the same thing with Minikoff.
Yeah. So before we came on live, you sent me a text about some news about the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix. You want to go ahead and tell our fans about that?
Yeah, that's going to be exciting, especially for guys that live on the West Coast. It was announced, Scott Coker announced that the heavyweight champion will be crowned in Los Angeles in January. So after this coming weekend, we've got another big fight, of course, that lightweights will probably talk about. The following weekend is that the Bellator heavyweight semifinals in New York and Connecticut, I believe.
I'll be at them.
And then the final will be in January in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that'll be January 26th at the Forum here in LA. I'll be looking forward to ticket information and getting that out. But yeah, you take us right into our lightweight fight. This Saturday is the mega fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor, really to crown the king of the lightweight division. Man, let's hope it happens. I don't know if we've ever really had much. I know everybody kind of knows my picks. If you've listened to the show, I'm a huge Khabib fan, and he's one of those people that I see that when I've seen him compete, just seemed like he was on another level than everybody. McGregor's right there though too. I mean, take away the Mendes first 9 minutes of the Mendes fight, what he did to Eddie Alvarez was incredible. But what's your opinion on that fight, Ed? I know you've got some notes about the event. Are you holding back your picks for this one, or you got a pick for that fight?
I was holding them for today. For the main event you're talking about with Khabib and McGregor. You want me to go right to the?
You can. What do you go down the card? Let's see what our picks are.
I mean, I got a lot. I got a lot. I mean, obviously that's the one. Like you said, though, it's. Somebody was texting me. One of my training partners actually was texting me, like because he always asks me who I pick because I'm only like 65% accurate or something like that with my picks. It's not very favorable, but it's good enough. It's kind of like right there. So
he's enough for Vegas.
Yeah. So he was asking me, and I told him, I said, okay, I'm leaning towards Khabib, obviously, for all the reasons everyone else is saying. You know, the wrestling, his strength, his durability during a fight. But that being said, I don't like what I'm seeing. Recent images of him already causing me concern for the weekend. You know what I mean? Like he might be just Matt Byrne, but he's looking very beat down. He's looking a little exhausted, which it's like, okay, if you've already beaten yourself up and you have to cut weight, I'm concerned, especially with his track record, if he's going to make it to Saturday. And here we are on Tuesday. You know, we're not going to find out till Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday morning for that matter, if he gets rushed to the hospital again or something like that. So obviously that's what everybody's worried about. But I think if he does make to the fight, I'm gonna go Khabib, but it's like a slight lean towards Khabib. And then as far as technical analysis goes, as far as the way he fights, and the way I remember McGregor fighting in MMA, Khabib has to adjust his stance. I think he's got to raise his hands higher and tuck his chin a little lower if he's going to get off anything against McGregor. Because even if McGregor doesn't pack the power that everybody has blown up to market him, he can still knock him off balance. Because even Eddie Alvarez, I believe, commented on it when he lost. They actually just showed it when I walked in the door and I turned on my TV. They were showing that fight on FS1 or MSG, and Alvarez got dropped by surprise, not because he was super powerful, but the timing messed up his footwork and that made him fall. So if that happens enough times, especially in Vegas, which is kind of McGregor's town here in the US, then I don't see things going well for Khabib. So I have my concerns, but I'm going Khabib. That's
what's your take, Yuri?
Yeah, I think I mean you're pretty much right on there. I don't know about the pre-fight. I haven't been watching too much reaction. I see some kind of that TMZ sports stuff. I don't follow that too heavily. But boy, you get the feeling this is such a big money fight. Boy, it would be pretty stupid to mess this up, not make weight, not really think your way into it. And I know there are some other factors, of course, we know about that. That are personal.
Yeah.
For him that can lead to that, but. It's a possibility. The thing about Conor McGregor is a year ago he takes this fight, he doesn't have a chance. And I think he knows that there's that possibility. And he's lost a few fights. Khabib has not. But the thing with Conor is that if he sees that there is something that he needs to work on, he's going to take that year off. And secretly, he's going to, have a team like, he paid just to come out with a decision over Nate Diaz. He pays a camp $300,000. He's going to come out and he's done his homework for Khabib. Is it enough? I don't know that it is. If they both come in at their best, I think Khabib somehow finds a way to get the guy down like almost everybody else. He's got an unblemished record. And once it hits the ground, I don't know if Conor gets back up.
Yeah.
It could end him in the first. Or it could be something where, there's a lot of feints on Khabib's part, and all of a sudden you see a head kick because he feints him down and he doesn't want to get taken down. You see a head kick rock Conor.
Yeah.
Something like that could happen. Obviously, Conor, Khabib doesn't live in fear of Conor's takedowns, so that's something that could happen.
Yeah.
But, Conor's timing is impeccable. It doesn't get better. So it's one of those things where it is a 50-50. If Conor does what Conor does, you still lean 60-40 Khabib, though, in that fight.
Yeah, that's the way I kind of see it. I feel like you said, if both show up on their game, I'll take the wrestler over the striker. Just how I've seen the sport in my time watching it. And, it doesn't always go that way, but that's where my money would go.
So
go ahead.
The one thing that's really the most important part, if we get to the fight and the bell rings and we get to the first round, I think the most concerning time for Khabib is going to be the earliest part, or the entire first round. Is he going to try to feel him out, and is he going to make the mistake where Conor can slip that straight left in that he's well known for? But I think if it goes past the first round, then it's all Khabib.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's interesting because most people would say that guys like Iakenta and stuff lasted where they and that was what they held against Khabib, was that the fight went on and it seemed like he lost his ability to do takedowns, where it looked to me like he just kind of wanted to work on his striking and prove that he could
Yeah.
kind of stand there.
I mean, that's a hard fight to use for reference, only because it was a last minute change. They didn't prepare for each other. You know what I mean? Like
That's true.
there's things that factor into why that went the way it did. And Iaquinta's a tough fight for anybody. Like I've said before in other episodes, I've been watching him fight since he fought amateurs here in Jersey at the Rawway Rec Center, Combat in the Cage, and all the Shady Ed Sue promotions. So it's like, he's a tough one for anybody. And McGregor tried to use that as his reference to say that Khabib is not at his level. But you got to take that into account. And the fact that he still dominated, and Iaquinta took it and even had his moments too in that fight. But with all the craziness that went on that week, I don't think that's a fight that people should be referencing too much, other than giving Iaquinta some credit for lasting 5 rounds with a monster like Khabib.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a valid point. If there's an exact replay of that fight, let's say with Conor doesn't survive on the ground like Iaquinta did, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's getting Kimura'd or choked out or
elbow to death.
Yeah, I don't think his defense will be good enough. And the one thing you could probably say about Conor is that when times get tough on him, especially on the ground, he's not. He hasn't shown the ability necessarily to overcome the adversity and fight back from a disadvantage.
I mean, he does drill escapes really well. I mean, if you look at when he went against Chad Mendes, I mean, the guillotine escape he pulls off 3 or 4 times. You could tell that it's so when he drills for things he's worried about, you see it works really well. Even against Nate Diaz, I forget if it's the first or second fight where he does the single leg X guard to the ankle pick to sweep Nate and stand up, and it happens at the end of the round that it happens in. My memory's fuzzy, but he does some nice things that you can tell he drills a lot for it, and I think that'll help him again early. But if it drags on, fatigue makes him like, what did he call it, saying at the Mayweather when he talked about the Mayweather stoppage? I get a floaty or loopy or whatever the hell he said. But yeah, you can see that happen on the ground too.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fight in Vegas. Anybody who's really talked to me about MMA knows I'm not a huge fan of Herb Dean, and he was named the referee for this fight. He's not one of the referees that I would want refereeing a big fight if I had my way with it. But I hope he doesn't see Khabib get hit. A situation where he's going for a takedown. I don't trust Herb Dean not to stop the fight with Conor fighting in some kind of premature action.
I find him to be a good ref. He's not like freaking Yamasaki or.
Did you see the fight with CB Dollaway a couple weeks ago?
No, I know it. Yeah, I saw the highlights, but that one was questionable. But it's not like he's got a record of doing it. He's not like he's not flat out daydreaming in the middle of a fight like Yamasaki does.
I think he is. I think he's so lackadaisical. He even this past weekend, I guess it was the Bellator. I don't know. I watched a lot of fights, but he doesn't take the initiative to step in. He's always kind of stepping back to avoid getting hit himself instead of breaking up a fight.
That's Joe Diesel Riggs' fault, by the way.
Did he hit him?
Well, didn't they fight?
Oh, I think they did fight in King of the Cage, but or Gladiator Challenge or one of those back in the day. But yeah, I just don't know. I mean, what he did to CB Dollaway was worse than anything I've ever seen Yamasaki do. I don't know if I saw anything Mazzagatti did worse. Kim Winslow had the fight with Cyborg and Jan Finney. That was the only fight I can think of in my mind that was anything as bad.
Who's that other horrible ref from Invicta? That Mike England.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys that are just bad refs and don't necessarily know what they're doing.
I don't know. I wouldn't put Herb Dean in those categories.
I think Herb Dean gets a lot of love because he's in the video game and he's been around a long time. I think if you actually looked at some of his fights that he stopped, and I don't mind if you stop fights early. I don't mind if you stop them late. But 1 week, don't stop a fight really early, and then the next fight on the card or later that weekend, stop a fight 85 punches late. Be a little
Be
bit
consistent.
consistent. Exactly. Let the fighters know what they're in for. We're going into this. The Fedor fight. Wasn't he the ref for Fedor and Dan Henderson?
Yes, he was. I was there.
And we can argue that fight back and forth, but
I'll say that right now that was a good stoppage. Back then, I said, look, I traveled 2,000 miles for this. Terrible stoppage. But and the other thing that we have to take into account of, I think, is how much love Herb has always got from Dana White. Dana praises somebody, all of a sudden they're amazing, and they have to do pretty bad to get off that list. But
let's say Khabib does to Conor what Henderson did to Fedor. What do you think the reaction of Dana White is on Saturday night?
You're already talking about you got to remove yourself from the conversation now, because you just admitted why you have your gripe with him, and it has something to do with your your favorite sweater wearing Russian. So
hey, listen.
Oh, shout out! Happy birthday to Fedor a couple days ago. Go ahead.
There you go. Yeah, his inconsistency is my thing. You stop that Fedor fight, you got to see the Dalloway fight. You can't just watch the 10-minute clip or 10-second clip of it. You got to watch the minute and a half just bludgeoning that he stands over and watches. The round ends and he still doesn't stop the fight, and he starts criticizing Dalloway for not getting up off the ground while he's basically in a coma, and tells him he's going to stop the fight if he doesn't get up to his stool. I mean, it was probably the worst stoppage I've ever seen in the UFC, and I just think I don't think he got enough. I think there should have been more said about it. I don't think he should be reffing this fight. Listen. Yeah, I don't know. It's just where I'm at. I haven't been a fan of him for a while. I don't think he's.
Shit.
I know. I just figured, we're about ready to get into you bitching about UFC 230's main event, and you get to go watch Fedor fight live next week.
I'm not gonna. No. I don't know if we're gonna have time for that. The way you've been rambling on about Barb Dean.
I'm getting the New Yorker out of me. I got to complain about something.
You got to hold it for when you're here.
So anyways, with all that said, obviously let's do the quick rundown of the card and get our quick picks in. I know the co-main event, Anthony Pettis against Tony Ferguson. I know Yuri, you believe Ferguson is the true lightweight champion, so I'm assuming you're picking him. Is that where you're at?
Yeah, that's a tough one, coming off an injury like that and then getting fed a hot Anthony Pettis. Not an easy comeback fight. But I certainly believe Tony's the most well-rounded in the division, and the true lightweight championship isn't happening. But I think you've got to pick Tony. I think his mind is on another level. It kind of reminds me of how Showtime was back in the day when he was hot. And they were pumping him up, and they had his specials. But Tony just, man, well, I said that about Koreshkov too. Oops. But Tony, boy, when you look in his eyes, you look at his training, he's kicking banana trees, whatever the heck he's doing. The man's mind is on championship level. And even coming through adversity, being the age he is, I think he takes that fight.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Anthony Pettis wins by decision. I'm curious to see how his kicks go. I'm curious to see how Ferguson's able to react, maybe to some trauma to his leg. You coming off an injury like that, it wouldn't be unheard of to see somebody have an off fight. And, I think Ferguson's the better fighter. But like you said, this is the Pettis you probably don't want to be fighting right now, other than the one we saw about half a decade ago in WEC. He seems to have come into his own in this weight class now, and just got over all of his injuries and seems to be really at the top of his game again. So I'm going to go out on a limb. I wouldn't put money on it, but I'm going to go out on a limb and take Pettis by decision.
That makes it fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm going Ferguson too, only because I see the same thing Yuri sees. I see him focused. I've seen his training footage with him back. I don't think he's concerned about his knee. Does that change if a leg kick comes a little close to it? Maybe we'll see, we'll have to see it during the fight. Excuse me, but I don't think that's enough to for me to pick against him. So I'm going Ferguson.
Then what else we got on the? We got OSP Dominic Reyes. Should be a solid fight. Reyes is kind of the up and comer against the kind of the light heavyweight gatekeeper right now, OSP. I'll go with the youngster Reyes. I think that he might just be the one of the next big things at the light heavyweight division in such a shallow pool at this point.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I'm looking at my notes. Because like you said, Reyes is like an up and coming killer. The only thing I'll say for OSP is his submission offense seems to have improved in more recent fights. So I don't know if that's enough to I don't know if that's enough to be a threat to Reyes, but it's I'm I have his name written with a question mark. I'm leaning towards Reyes, obviously, because of the win streak he's been on, and that's where I'll leave that.
Yeah,
Anything on that one, Yuri?
I don't have anything on that one because Yuri doesn't have any notes, and I don't know as much about Reyes as I probably ought to. OSP, of course, he's been around a while and gritty veteran, all that, big, strong. He might be at that point where, boy, it's a must-win for OSP to go anywhere ever again. I don't think if he loses this fight, he's going to come anywhere near a title shot anytime soon. So that's what I could. That's the input I have on it. Not so much Dominic. I'll have to brush up after the show.
Yeah, no worries. A fight that you're well familiar with, both of the guys. Former Bellator heavyweight champion and one of the top contenders now in UFC, Alexander Volkov, goes up against the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, who's coming off a lackadaisical win against Nagano at UFC 226 in July. Um, I'm sure you'll have something to say about this. I know you're well familiar with Volkov.
Yeah, Volkov is he's a crafty guy. I'm gonna go out on a limb on this one and say that it's not just Ngannou that feels bad about that last fight, but the Beast as well.
Yeah.
And he might just come out and crush Volkov. I think he does want to make a statement. Sometimes the better fighter doesn't always win. This may be one of those times.
It's funny you say that because I kind of feel the same way. I feel like this is a fight. Volkov probably should be fighting for the championship right now, and I have a feeling that it might be something where he takes the fight a little lightly and he walks into a strong right hand and just gets blasted. Again, I think Volkov is head and shoulders above Lewis as far as MMA skill and I think his ceiling. I think he'll eventually be a UFC title contender, if not champion. But like you said, I have a kind of a feeling about Lewis redeeming himself and kind of fighting up to his competition in this one, where he didn't necessarily do it in the last fight, although he got the win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Volkov on this one too. Only because so Lewis has a back issue that he keeps saying is resolved, but then he references it again,
Every time.
after the fight. And he's a heavyweight. He's got a lot of power. He's obviously at the top level in the UFC, but he's still not in the shape that Volkov is in. I think Volkov can, if he doesn't finish him like he's finished, how I forget how many what I write here. He's on a 5-fight win streak. He's 20 out of his 30 wins are by knockout or TKO. So if he doesn't finish Lewis, I think he can get pull off a decision and outwork Lewis, especially again, that's the fight week. Anything can happen with the UFC lately. So if Lewis can get out of bed and not have the back issue or have any tinge back issues at all during the fight, then I think the fight happens. But I think Volkov can still win.
And then the events opened with Karate Hottie Michelle Watterson and Felice Herrig. I don't know who wins the fight, but I'm not picking against Karate Hottie. So that's just where I'm at with that. I'll take Michelle Waterson by decision in this fight.
Actually, yeah, Felice has come along, and she's great to watch too. But I wouldn't want to upset anybody on the forum. I would say that, yeah, I'm going to pick Karate Hottie because Karate Hottie.
I mean, it's hard to call that one, like you said. I mean, I'm looking at my notes. That's actually the one I wrote the most on. Because even though like Karate Hottie, so Waterson's got a lot of. I'm not gonna keep calling her Karate Hottie because that's not her goddamn name. But Waterson's so she's obviously shown susceptibility to submission, but she's also got submission wins to her record. She's got a lot of wins by decision too. So it looks like I think I'm leaning towards her simply because I feel like she can outwork Herrig. Herrig's no slouch. She's gotten better, but I don't know if she's gotten good enough to beat a former champion. You know, because she held Waterson was a champion Invicta. And I don't know if she's got enough evolution to beat her, but we'll see. I mean, everybody changes. She's improved, but Waterson has shown you know, like she hasn't been having the best time in the UFC, but I think she's got enough to as far as fights go. She's obviously getting promoted the hell out of her because she's fine, but yeah, I think I'm leaning towards Waterson only because I think she's got more wits about her to at least pull off a decision.
Yeah, you've got all your notes. My notes are usually in GIF form when it comes to Michelle Waterson. Not a lot of words. So with that said, we've been talking for what seems like 45 decades now about the potential main event for Madison Square Garden, which is now only 31 days away. And the UFC dropped a little bit of a bomb
Did
on
I tell
us.
you I'm not going? Did I tell you I'm not going anymore? No, I'm only kidding.
Yeah, so we got the fight that nobody expected and doesn't seem like really anybody wanted. Valentina Shevchenko against Sijara Eubanks for the not the inaugural, but for the vacant flyweight title, female flyweight title. So, you know, obviously it's a disappointment. The whole main card is pretty stacked. We've talked about it from Diaz and Poirier down to Jacare Branch, Weidman Rockholt, and Brunson Adesanya. So, you know, I don't think anybody can really argue about the main card. I said it's about a B+ card in my opinion. The order of the fights to me has never been all that relevant. As long as nobody drops off, I'm happy considering the ticket prices that
someone's going to drop off. It's New York. It's the UFC. We're going to lose a fight before Friday.
I know. It's what I get for
we already
traveling.
lost one. We lost Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley got pulled for smoking weed or whatever the fuck he did.
That's because John Jones snitched on him. You East Coast snitches are going in here snitching on Sean O'Malley. He got pulled from this weekend's card. He was supposed to be.
That's what I'm talking about. Like UFC can't go full cards without no fights getting lost when it comes to pay-per-view. Yeah, so we're gonna that UFC 230 is gonna get shot. People complaining about the main event. We'll be happy that we have that when we lose like 5 fights because the commission sees somebody needs fucking chapstick or whatever the fuck is wrong with them.
I hear you. I don't think it's a terrible fight. It's not a main event worthy fight.
Yeah. That needs to be said. Like people are shitting all over Sijara Eubanks and Valentina Shevchenko. It's not these ladies, people. It's the promotion throwing a fight because they feel like the title fight has to headline the Garden. That's not the one though. I mean, the one should have been the 165 with Diaz and Poirier, regardless if they deserve it or not. I mean, having them as a main event would have just brought fire to the Garden again. But now you got these two ladies with all this extra responsibility. Shame on you.
So I've heard a little bit about this. Are we saying that? So now Valentina Shevchenko and Eubanks, they're the headline?
They're the headline right now, apparently for Madison Square Garden. Most people are just are not happy because Shevchenko was scheduled to fight Joanna at 231 about a month later. I might catch some heat for this, but I actually think that this fight's a better fight. I don't think it's the entertaining fight that Joanna and Valentina would be, but I think stylistically
Yeah, it's
and
more competitive.
And Eubanks is a tough woman. I mean, she was supposed to fight for the title when they first had it, you know. And but the problem is the reason why people are giving her especially so much crap is because she had issues during her season of the Ultimate Fighter making weight, and she had issues. Obviously, she couldn't make it to the fight for that inaugural flyweight title. But I mean, she's still like she's a military. I think she's a former military veteran. She's a tough woman.
Yep.
She's not somebody that I mean, she obviously wants it. So I mean, yeah, I think it's a good fight, like you said, Matt. But it's still fucking like I'm telling you, like when you come to the Madison Square Garden, you can't bring no light shit. You got to come with some fucking. I mean, the flyweight division hasn't been popular even when Demetrius Johnson was the king of the flies. It still was a hard push to sell for tickets and pay-per-view buys and things like that. So you can't come with that to the Garden. You need the big boys up on top.
Yeah,
I
I don't think Diaz and Poirier sells out that arena either. You know, most people that I saw on Twitter and when tickets went on sale, UFC sent out a banner that had that fight and then the Weidman Rockhold fight, and most people thought that Diaz and Poirier were main eventing it. There was thousands of comments on Twitter about, oh, you know, the main event's already set. Look what UFC sent me. I bought my tickets, and if somebody who's deep into ticket sales and event sales and stuff. The right now there's thousands and thousands of seats available. I mean, you know, and I don't think it's going to pick up. But I had the people of New York and the East Coast bought tickets when they thought that, you know, when that was the fight that was kind of a possibility. I think it could have been promoted.
Cost of living is very expensive around here. We don't like throwing our money around like that. We need to know things before we spend money.
The ticket prices were beyond reasonable. Probably the cheapest UFC event I've seen that's not a fight night in
cheap for the Garden.
No, cheap for any UFC.
Yeah.
The top ticket price was $406. You could have sat fifth row for this event for $400. I you know, and the fights are still scheduled to go down. People wanted 5 rounds with Diaz and Poirier. We're gonna still get 3 rounds of that. We still get, like I mentioned, the Weidman, and you know, it's just, you know, it's the UFC has it. I'm glad they didn't create a 165-pound division. I don't think we need another title. I don't think we need another potential interim title. Diaz is great to watch.
The interim thing would have pissed me off even more.
I don't think Diaz deserves a title shot. He's great to watch, but you know, people are going after Eubanks for being technically 1-0 in the UFC. Yeah. They're discounting her wins on the Ultimate Fighter, where she beat Deanna Bennett and I think she beat Lauren Murphy on the show as well, or she beat Lauren Murphy outside or in her one fight. But
that's what I take issue with, though. Like don't shit on the poor woman because she it's not like she it's not something that she made happen. It's the promotion doing it.
Yeah,
you know, and she's a solid fighter. I mean, she would have fought for the title the first time. So like let her have her chance.
Yeah. Now, with that said, she better make weight. If she doesn't make weight, I send her shipping off to fight Gabby Garcia or something in you know
that's punishment.
You know, so I think she's got to know that. So I don't know.
She does know it. I mean, because she's been pretty active on social media defending the decision and things like that. And I'm just kind of like I'm trying to get to it. She's got something out here. Yeah. She's yeah, you said my word, I will make way. Yeah, she says she's making promises on like she knows the weight issue is a thing with the fans, and she's letting us know she has full intention of making the weight. So
yeah. No, I think she will. I think it'll be a good fight. It'll just be a down way to end the night, especially if Diaz and Poirier turns out to be fireworks. Right up to that. So, you know, people like you can get on your trains and head back to Brooklyn or Long Island or Staten Island, and you know, others can stay around and watch the championship fight. But yeah, it's obviously disappointment. We talked about everything from Brock Cormier to Jones Cormier to, you know, all these incredible fights. And when the ticket prices came out, we knew.
And again, we got to say, I mean, I haven't seen the because didn't. The UFC hasn't put anything out official. This is
It,
off of Brett Okamoto confirming it, but at ESPN. But like we haven't seen the poster and stuff. Like, can they still change it? Are they going to still try to change it?
Well, there never was a real poster. It was their generic banner. You bring that up though, because I jokingly said with one of my buddies earlier, it'll be interesting to see how they make the poster. With all the talent on the card, it'd be pretty shocking to have their typical cookie cutter, event poster where it's the two girls' faces when you have former champions and living legends fighting on the card. And so I'm hoping that they just kind of promote the whole card, and that they just kind of added this fight just to give them their 5th fight for the main card. It gives a female fight to the card. There was 0 female fights, so it eliminates that eventual bitching by somebody that there's not a female fight on a fight card at Madison Square Garden. But it is what it is. If it's UFC might feel strong arm, might change it. I don't know why they don't make it the co-main event. I don't know why they just don't offer Diaz Poirier the main event spot in a non-title 5-round number 1 contendership fight. It could be all promoted the same way. The UFC's had events where they promoted the whole card. It doesn't necessarily have to be a single fight. I think back to I think it was like UFC 73 or 77 or some of those where you had the fight posters where it was everybody was on the card. It was, it's hard for me to remember the exact card, but there was events like that, and that's how I'd like to see it promoted. Hopefully they put out a poster with everybody's face on it, and they just that's how they go about it. But not what we expected. Hopefully the rest of the card holds, and I'm still glad that I can sleep at night knowing that I'm not taking a group of 9 people across country for an event that could be canceled. I was seeing stuff on Twitter about, hey, just cancel the event, and I was telling Ed I was about ready to walk away from this sport if they canceled it on my birthday with the amount of money I've got a group spending to travel across country.
Yeah, I mean, I was even just like, I don't even want to go anymore. I'll watch it at a fucking bar at this point. But I mean, it's still like you said, the undercard, like the Weidman Rockhold, Poirier Diaz, Branches, and Jacare, like there's the card as a whole is solid and good enough to watch, and I think it's still. I mean, after calming myself the fuck down, I'm like, you know what? Let's calm down and remember, this is something that couldn't happen in New York, before 2016. So let's be happy at what we're getting before somebody else decides to ban the goddamn sport again.
Yeah, and I'll bet you a beer it's not worse than 208. You sat through that debacle of an event.
Shit.
You can
that whole card and MMA and Barclays ever again. Yeah.
So awesome. Well, we're gonna wrap up the show here. I told a member of the MMA community I'd give him a shout out, so I'm gonna do it now. Dat Pre Holly Holm Ronda Money, the MMA genius from the MMA Community.com. Promised him a shout out, so there
That's
it is,
one
brother.
person's name?
Dat Pre Holly Ronda Money. So I jokingly told him I'd give him a shout out. So there that is. As usual, fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, at Carbeerzol on Instagram. Although I haven't seen a lot of posts lately from you on Instagram.
I might delete that off my phone.
Yuri, you want to? I know everybody can find you at Spark Yuri on the MMA Community.com forum for plenty of opinionated talk. You want to throw out your Twitter handle or anything else?
Same thing. At Spark Yuri.
Awesome. Yep. And all right, well, thanks for joining us, man. Good talking with a couple of my good MMA friends here, and I think we brought some knowledge, and it was nice to talk to you about being at the big Bellator event over the weekend. So thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good one, Ed.
Right,
keep
man.
an eye on your blood pressure, brother.
Yeah, I will. I will.
Good to see you, Ed.
All right, good meeting you, man. See you.